So before starting to make your poster, you need to make sure that you know the dimensions of the printed poster. So in order to do that, what I did is I just Googled it and looked for the most commonly used poster sizes. If you're making this for a client, they will probably give you the dimensions, but if not, you can just use the internet. And on standardpostersizes.com, I found that the most commonly used one is 27 by 40 inches. And on Amazon, I found that the Incredibles poster, it's actually the same size, 27 by 39. So I used a similar size, but that was, even for the stock images that I have, that size was huge. So I have to reduce this. I reduced it to half that size. So what you do, let me show you first what I got here on the layers palette. You can have like the background and a few elements grouped, so I have a bit of a cleaner layers palette, and this is the finished poster. Now in order to start making this, as I said, you press Ctrl Command N, and you can give your poster name Day 3 Poster PSD box. Okay, and here you can set the dimensions in pixels, inches, centimeters, millimeters, whatever. Let's set it in inches, 27 by 40, and then the color should be set to CMYK, because, well, this is the printing profile color mode that it's usually used for printing, but we will use the RGB mode for this tutorial. So set your width and height in inches and click OK. And this is the size that we get, but if you press Control Command and Alt I, you will see that the height is 12,000 pixels, and that's quite big. And you can see the printing size would be, for the resolution of 300 pixels per inch, would be like 1 meter by 68 centimeters wide. So that's really big. So what I did is I just reduced this to half that size, and then I had this 6,000 by 4,000 pixels, and I'll click OK. Now if you download the PSD file of this tutorial, this one, you will see that it's even smaller, because at the actual size this is 700 megabytes, so that's huge. And well, I just give you the PSD file so you can see what I did here on the layers palette. But well, so we have our document here. The next thing we want to do is make some guides, just to make everything is lined up, and also we need some guides to create our safe zone. We need to leave a few a few millimeters here of edge around the whole poster here, just to make sure that everything is inside the safe area, because sometimes when you print it, the edges, well, don't look nice, so they cut it. So I will go to View, choose New Guide, and well, let's see the dimensions in millimeters. We have like 508. We will leave 5 millimeters of edge there. So if the height is 508, we'll type, well, we'll go to View, New Guide, and for the horizontal, for the top one, we'll use 5 mm for millimeters. Click OK. Now let's go to the top one, to the bottom one, sorry, New Guide, and this time we'll type 503, because remember the total size, the height was 508, and we want 5 millimeters of gap, so we put 503 and click OK. That way we have 5 millimeters of edge, of margin here on the bottom, and we will do the same for the vertical, 5 millimeters on the left. And now for the right side, you can see it's in millimeters is 342. So we have to add 5 millimeters on the right as well. So to View, New Guide, 338 millimeters. And we have our edges here. And now let's make a new guide, 50% vertical, so that we know where the center of this poster is. Okay, now we have the basic guides here, and we are ready to create the background. The first thing that I did is I added a gradient, and I used a black and white and choose a really light gray, something like that. Click OK, and I set the style to radial, and then I reversed it just because I wanted to have a bit more light there on the center. Maybe move it up slightly like so, and click OK. I think I will change that white area to something a little darker. Yeah, something like that, and click OK. We will delete the background layer, we don't need it. And now we will open the textures that we will use for this. All the images are downloaded from Deposit Photos, so you'll have them here in this folder. And we will open this one first. Open with CS6. Control A, Control C, Control W to close that, and we will paste this here. And we'll have to, with Control T, I loaded the free transform. And now I'll make it a bit bigger to cover my entire canvas here, and I'll set the blend mode of this to soft light, and I'll reduce the opacity to 50%. I just wanted to have a bit of texture and a bit of color. See that? If you want more color, just drop a bit the tones here on the gradient, just use something a little darker, and that's it. And then what I wanted to do is give it a little more texture, so I went to filter, sharpen, and I used an unsharp mask. I'll probably take a look at 100%. See that? See this texture here? Well, that's, the radius is too high, I think. Something like that. Just see the before and after. Okay, we're good to go. Reduce the zoom and open another texture. So I will open this texture now. Open it with Photoshop CS6. And I'll paste it on top of the first one. You can see this one is pretty much, well, it's covering our whole canvas here without having to enlarge it. I'll leave the opacity of this layer to 50% as well, and leave the normal blend mode. Okay, so I will leave the normal blend mode and the opacity at 50%. Now I will add a hue saturation on top of everything here, and I'll reduce the saturation to -50, just to make it just desaturate it a bit, reduce the color. Now the next thing that I did is add, well, that model there and the title and everything. So let's go back to our folder here, and this is our creepy model. Let's copy everything. We will not use any kind of masking, even though we could. So we're not going to crop that with the pen tool. I'll just copy that, paste it here, create a duplicate. Let's name this shadows, and this one color. So once you have both layers, the shadow one, which is set to multiply to get rid of the white background, and then the color, which is well, to bring back the color on the image. Well, what I will do first is link both layers. Select both of them, right click and choose link. And in order to remove the white area of the top layer, the color layer, what I will do is use the magic wand tool. I want to keep it easy, and it's not really necessary to be very precise here, because we have that bottom layer which keeps all the detail. So with this selection made, what I will do is choose refine edge just a little bit. First I'll have to inverse the selection. Oops, blending change, no. Select inverse, okay. Now go to refine edge. And let's see this on overlay, on layers. Okay, because I want to see the detail here. What I will do is shift the edge a bit, increase the feather, and increase the contrast a little bit. And maybe increase the smoothness. And let's set this to layer mask and click OK. And you will see what happened. Now, you will see the bottom layer. You can still see some white areas here on the hair, but you can see everything else looks perfect. The background also helps, so if you do this on a black background, probably you will not get as good results as you do with the background which is light, like this one. What I'll do is now select the layer mask of the color layer and use a brush, a soft brush, to just remove the white areas from the hair around here. Because as I said, we have that bottom layer that acts, see that? If I deactivate the bottom layer, you see what happens. The black areas of the hair remain there because we switched to multiply, and only the white areas disappear. The black areas, which are the hair and everything else, is still there. It's just that they are a little darker. Okay, now let's deal with this part of the feet here. What I will do is select, this is from the top layer, okay, well, from the bottom one as well, but we will select the bottom layer, and with the brush, we paint this away. We don't want it. We don't want the reflection. We just barely want the shadow there. It's not easy to isolate this, so we probably have to paint some of the shadows ourselves. We'll see how this looks after we mask it. Okay. And let's do the same with the left foot here. What I want to do, since the background layer, well, this bottom layer, the shadows, is only for the shadows, and what I will do is desaturate it, not completely, but almost, because you can see this reflection has some color. You can see how it looks now. So I will reduce this to -52. You can see everything became like pretty much black and white because I have the top layer deactivated. If I reactivate it, you can see how that looks. Okay, well, let's deactivate the top layer for a second and keep masking here. And now switch brush colors and do it again. And get rid of this line over here, like so. Okay, now it looks great. Let's, oh well, we still have this part here. Okay, now I'll reactivate the top layer and I'll use its layer mask to remove everything from here. So you can see, working with these two layers, it's quite easy to keep the original shadows without having to take too much, without having to pay too much attention to the edges of your object or whatever you're having. Now, I would like to add just a little soft shadow there, so I'll create a new layer underneath underneath these two layers, and I'll call it soft shadow. I'll use the brush tool. I'll reset the colors and use a big soft brush. Opacity and flow at about 50 and 30. And just a couple of clicks there to create this sort of soft shadow. Well, I don't like it. I want to add one for, well, for each foot there. Yeah, something like this, something very subtle, and I'll use the colorize to make it a little red, because it was a bit, had a bit of a red tone to it. Okay, and I'll click OK now, and this is the shadow that I got. Probably make it just a little, not with this, with the color balance, a little darker. Okay, so we have our creepy model there. Now, one thing that I did is I wanted to make it a bit brighter. So on the top layer, the color layer, I'll add a levels adjustment layer, not curves. Levels, not curves. Levels. And I'll clip it to the color layer, so create clipping mask. And I have the midtone set to 1.10 and the highlights to 238, just to bring up the highlights a bit. And then I created another clipped layer, this time a hue saturation adjustment. Hue saturation, also clipped to the color layer. And I decreased the saturation of this layer to -18. Okay, just to reduce some of that color cast there on the dress. Now we have this. Let's add that bed that was there on the background. So let's go back to our folder, and this is the image that I used. I wanted to use hospital bed, something really old, but I couldn't find anything, so this was the only thing that I could find. So I'll copy this, select all, copy, close it, and let's go down here. Let's group everything here. Let's name this model. So everything that has to do with the model is inside this group, and everything here we will group it, and we will name this background. Okay, now in between these two layers I'll add that bed over there. I'll hide the model group for a second until I have this isolated, and we will use the same technique that we used on the model. We'll duplicate this, and the bottom one we will name it shadows, and the top one we'll name it color, even though it doesn't have that much color, but anyways. And we'll change the blend mode of the shadows layer to multiply, and we'll see that it will not work as well as it did with the model, because this was not pure white, so the background. So we'll need to help this a little bit. So I'll press Ctrl Command L while I have the shadows layer selected, because I'm working on the shadows layer now. And I'll increase the highlights about that much, and maybe a bit the midtones about that much. I still want to have shadows. I want to have this shadows right here. Okay, so I want to keep those. Probably leave the midtones a little darker, how they were. Something like that, and especially the highlights. Okay, and now create a layer mask for this. When you use this technique, make sure you don't move the layers. So the best way to avoid that is selecting both layers and choose link layers. That way, if you move one layer, the other one will move with it at the same time. So, oops, let's paint on the layer mask with black at 100%, flow and opacity, and just paint like that. This shadow over here, you can use like 10 or 20 opacity and just paint there to remove that. Make sure you keep this shadow right here. It looks nice. And now I'll bring back some of the color there. Okay, now we have the bed there. Let's reactivate the top layer, create the layer mask for it. Well, actually, what I will do is just duplicate this layer and reduce its opacity. Well, I have to delete it because I saw something here. I saw this edge here, which I don't like. Just wanted to mask it out. Okay, now let's do that. Let's just duplicate this layer and reduce the opacity to about 20 or something like that. And we have our bed here. Some shadows, I don't like them. Just delete again. Increase a bit the the hardness of the brush because I want to paint here on the edge. So what I will do is put the brush there on the edge, click there, and just press and hold the shift key and click down here, and that way I can create a straight line along this. See that? Probably decrease the opacity and float to about 20%. Okay, I think that looks better now. And now I'll duplicate that layer, as I said. There's one bit of shadow there that I don't like. Great. Now reduce the opacity on the top one, top layer. Okay, select both layers, group them, and let's name this bed. Now I'll reactivate the model group. Now let's see where we place this bed so that it looks natural. Use the move tool. I think I'll move it about here, somewhere there. I'll reduce the opacity of the top layer on the bed group even more. Just 10, something like that. And one thing I didn't like here on the model is this dripping blood here. You can leave it if you want, but I didn't like it, so I'll use this layer masks to get rid of it. Just paint with black. You have to do this on both layers, okay? So on the shadows layer and on the color layer as well. Let's use a bit of a harder brush. Okay, we're good to go. Let's leave that there, reactivate the bed group. Okay, let's add some blood here on the ground. And what I will do is open one of the blood images that I got, which was this one. Open with Photoshop CS6. Select all, copy, and close this. And what I will do now is, with that image copied on the clipboard, I'll create a new layer. So what I will do now with this layer here, I'll paste that blood image that I just copied, change the blend mode to multiply, and let's make it smaller like that. And now we'll use the perspective tool, and if you press and hold the shift key, the alt key, sorry, on the keyboard, or option on a Mac, you can see that you can widen the bottom parts of this box at the same time. And I'll probably make it smaller now. Right click and choose free transform, and make sure to press the shift key so that way you keep the proportions. And oops, that was not good. I'll do it again. Control Command T. First I'll use the free transform just to make it a little smaller, and then use the perspective. Okay, a little wider. Press enter, and now the free transform again to make it a little smaller, and place it there. Now I don't want all of this, some parts of it I don't like, so what I will do is create a layer mask, use the brush tool, and make sure you get rid of especially these parts where you see edges, straight lines. I don't want that, so I'll use a hard brush to just remove parts of this. Some drips from here I want to remove. And let's see what we can do with this. Probably create like a round edge there. Okay, that looks a bit better. Maybe some of the drips here, I want to remove them. Always use layer masks instead of using the eraser tool, because maybe you want to bring back later some of the details here, so with the layer mask you can do that. Now let's see if I can use this other, well, another blood image from here. I'll probably use this one, so I'll open this with Photoshop and do the same. Control A to copy it, Control C, Control W to close this document, and go back to my canvas and paste it on top of this other image. Change the blend mode to multiply so that the white background goes away, and just make this smaller, like so, just a little bigger. I don't want these drops here, just this ones. We'll see how we can deal with that. Just make it a little smaller. You can use smart objects, so before you make it smaller you can turn this into a smart object, and then you can make any changes that you want here, and then you can make it back bigger if you want without losing quality. But I will do it like this. Maybe something like that. Choose the, let's see the distort, just to make it sit there on the ground, and I want to make it smaller now. Try to match more or less the perspective of this one. Okay. Okay, I'll create a layer mask now for it, and just get rid of some of the drops here. This one as well. This one's. Maybe move it around a bit. Somewhere there. Now you have to make sure that they have pretty much the same colors. These ones do, so I don't have to make any changes to them. But if you want to match the colors of both layers, of both images, what you can do is use hue saturations as a clipping mask. Let's say this one is a bit darker, which is it. Well, it's a bit darker, but not really noticeable. So what you do is just clip this hue saturation adjustment to the layer, and then you can use these, well, not the lightness, do not touch the lightness. You can reduce the saturation a bit, and you can make it darker. And if you increase the saturation, you can make it brighter. Or you can use levels, but this one does work. I want to desaturate this a bit. Well, actually what I will do is, since I have Photoshop CS6, I can group this and add a hue saturation and clip it to the group. If you don't have Photoshop CS6 and you cannot clip adjustment layers to groups, you can do it for both. You can use the 2 hue saturations for both layers, well, 1 for each. I will use only 1 because I can do it. And I'll reduce the hue saturation to about -18. Let's name this group ground blood. Okay, we have the blood there on the ground. Okay, so now we have the blood there on the ground. I will probably add a little more or make this images a little bigger. Let's increase the size just a bit for this one as well. And just leave it there. Okay, let's move on and add the title of our movie. The title that I gave to this was Day 3. I don't know why. Something weird happened on the 3rd day or something. I don't know, you can think about something yourself. I just thought it was a cool name, and that's it. So I create a new layer on top of everything. I will drag this title below the model group, but first we will make it and put it inside its own group and then drag it down. But now let's work on this layer. So I will type day, and the font that I used for this, for the word day, is some weird font called I will see it, this one, Nocifer. I use the Nocifer font for the word day, and a little smaller, about 170, something like that, 177 or 78, I don't remember. So let's leave that there, and then create a new layer, because the number 3 I used another font for it, and the font that I use is called Levy Brush. I think both of these fonts are free, so just Google them on the internet. Levy Brush, where are you? This one. And just a little bigger, 220 or something like that. Yeah. Okay, let's select both of them, and with the move tool selected, I will align them. I will align the centers, well, or the bottoms. And the 3 goes a little lower, so I'll put it back here. Okay. Great. Now we have the title here, but we need to make it look a little better and a little creepier. So what I will do is go back to my stock folders, to my stock images folder, and I'll open this texture, which is what I used for the title. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it on top of the day layer, and I'll clip it. So I'll choose create clipping mask, and with the move tool I'll move it right there on top of it, and I'll have to make it smaller. So with Control Command T, load the hue saturate on the free transform tool and make it a little smaller. Make sure you cover the drips there as well. So this is the texture that we have for our title. What I will do is use the on-sharp mask just to sharpen this a little and give it, yeah, more texture. Okay. We will deal with the 3 a little later. Let's now open our bloody stock images again, and I'll open this image. You can see it's paint, but anyways, we will call it blood, and we'll paste this on top, and again clip it to the day layer, and we will change the blend mode of this layer to multiply. And of course I'll have to make it smaller and just add one image there, and then just press and hold the Alt key, click and drag this down to create a duplicate, and now I'll shift it horizontally like that and leave it there, probably making it a little bigger. Make sure that you have this part of the D letter totally covered. Don't just leave spaces there. I don't want to see the texture through it. I just want to have this part totally covered. Okay. Now the texture looks gray, so what I will do is select it, and you have a few options here. You can use the hue saturation, or an easier option is to just use layer styles. Select a color overlay, and let's see, blend modes, soft light, multiply even, it's too strong. Maybe, let's see, color burn. Yeah, just reduce the opacity, just to have a bit of a red tone there. Click OK. And now let's add that effect there. The first thing I want to do is create a layer mask for the text itself. So, okay. And what I will do now is create a layer mask for the day layer. Get the brush tool, and from the regular brushes, just click this icon here and choose reset brushes and click OK. And you can use any of these brushes here just to get rid of this part of the D. So what I will do is just zoom in a little. So use the brush tool and just paint like that using these brushes. You can also increase the size a little and just destroy a bit these parts. Like that. One other thing you can do, it's really easy to, you can create a custom brush. Let me open, for example, this one, open with Photoshop CS6, and I'll just go to edit, define brush preset. You can see just as it is, just like that. Or one other thing you can do if you want to make sure everything looks better, oops, is desaturate this and then use levels. Yeah, that looks better. And then go to edit, define brush preset, and click OK, and click this. Close this, and now go back to this document, and I have my brush here. It's quite big, so what I will do is reduce the size of it and just mask with this. See how easy it was to create your own brush. What I will do though is use the brush tip shape dynamics, set this to off, and just one angle, the angle jitter, so that I have different angles. That looks a bit better. Now I destroyed too much of it, so what I'll do is now switch back to the white and paint back. We're still not done yet. This is just for blending purposes. Okay, let's leave it like it is, and now go back to our stock folder and open this image again. Open with Photoshop by default, copy it, and now let's paste this under the text, under the day layer. Yeah, so what I'll do is create a new layer under the day layer by holding the control key and clicking the new layer icon. You will create the layer below the layer that you have selected, and now I will paste that image right here. Now you can see it's huge, so first I will change the blend mode to multiply just like before to get rid of the white background, and now I'll make this smaller. And the reason why I told you to keep this part of the D covered is because now this image is blend a lot better. See that? I just wanted to create like the effect that this part of the D letter is exploding or something like that. So we will leave that there, drag it somewhere around there, and we're good to go now. Well, we're not good to go because you can see we have this, like, it kind of, you can tell that this is, you can see the edges here. So what I will do is create a layer mask for this. Get the brush tool. You can use the same brush that I just used a moment ago, that I just created. Just paint around there to just probably use a bigger one. And then switch back to white and paint back. So it's not really that complicated. It's just a matter of being patient and knowing the basics about layer masks and things like that. Okay, let's get rid of this. Let's use our custom brush to fix this part over here. Okay, and now I will open another stock image, which is this one. Open with. I will put this image, you will see it right now, under the image that I just pasted now. Change the blend mode to multiply. And of course I have to make it smaller. I want to put it right here to like create a better explosion effect. See that right there? The problem is here that you can see that the colors don't match. You can clearly see that. So what I will do is use first the hue saturation to desaturate a bit this image, and then use levels. Just make this whole thing darker like that, and maybe use hue saturation again like so, and then levels again, can see it becomes darker and darker. Let's leave it like it is, and maybe flip it. Oh, don't really like it. I think I desaturated too much. What I don't like of this is this drop here. Get rid of that. I desaturated the image too much, so I'll increase the saturation, maybe the lightness slightly. Yeah, that looks now a lot better. Okay, so now those edges there are no longer visible. See that? What I will do now is just duplicate this and drag it down here, and maybe spin it around a little. I'll place it there, and if you take a look at it, you can see now it looks a little better than before. At least that's what I think. Yeah, like that, right there. And now probably remove some of the droplets here. I'll probably use the eraser tool here. Okay, so that's how I created this damaged D letter with all of this blood here. Let's do the same with the 3. So what I will do is just copy this texture on top of it, pressing and holding the Alt key, click and drag it, and clip it to the 3 letter there, the 3 number. And just drag this around and probably leave it there. And we will do the same. We will copy, well actually I will use the same textures here and just leave it like that. Again, where you want that explosion of blood, this splatters here, make sure you have this like covered. And we'll do the same. Create a layer mask for the 3 layer, get the brush tool and just destroy part of this like so. Destroy more than you actually need, because then you will change the, we'll switch the color and paint back and get something like that. Okay, and now I will use that same image that I copied, that I actually just copied this one from here. I'll show you which image is right now. It's this one, okay, and I'll put it here and make it smaller. And you can see how nice it's seamless. It really blends well. I have to spin it around a bit to find the best place for it, but it doesn't look bad at all. Okay, so we have our title here. What I will do now is select all of the layers containing the title, press Ctrl Command G to group it, and you can see I have it now in a group, which I'll name title, and I'll drag it under the model and between the model and the bed, and I'll use those guides. If you press Ctrl Command H, you can see you can hide or unhide the guides. Also, if you have a selection, let me show you. If you select this, if I press Ctrl Command H, the selection will go away. It's still selected, but it's not visible until you press Ctrl Command H. And with Ctrl Command D, you deselect. Okay, let's go back to our title, and I want to, if I press Ctrl Command T, I will load this, which shows me where the center is, but since we have that texture that goes beyond the title, the true center of the title is not this one, so it's not going to work as I expected. So I'll put the title right there, like so, as centered as you can. Oops, my computer is starting to run slow already, because I already have that other document opened, this one, and I have this one, and also recording at 1080p. So okay, so we have the title there. Now let's add the details. The design of the poster is done, so there's not much more to add to it. So I added the name of some imaginary actors here. I used the internet I just use a random name generator to add the names there, and I'll just copy them from here. I'll show you what fonts I use and everything. So let's just drag this to this document here. Let me show you how I did that. Let's center this like that. So what I did is, as I said, I used some random name generators, and then I created a new layer, and I just used the pencil tool. I used a square. I used the square brushes. Okay, don't save. I used let's see, about 7 or 9 pixels, 10 maybe. Use the red color and just press and hold the shift key, click under the name once, and then just use the shift key and just create the line like that. This red is too bright, so probably use a darker one like so. Okay, and just create a line like that. It's that easy. Just remember to hold the shift key while you do it. The fonts that I used for this, let's see, I used the Adobe Devanagari. Well, this one. It's a really weird font. I think it comes with Photoshop, that's why it's called Adobe. I'm not sure. I use the capital. You can see if you press this, you can capitalize all letters. And the top names, I used a smaller font, and then for the bottom ones, I used a bigger font size, just to create a bit of an emphasis. Okay, and that's how the names look. These are the starring actors of this imaginary horror movie. One thing I don't like too much is the blood here. I want to make it a little more unsaturated and maybe use levels clipped to the group. Remember, I'm clipping this to the whole group there. Just make it, oops, it's not working because I have this set to multiply, but anyways, I'll leave it like that. Now, another thing that we need to add is the credits. Credits are usually here on the bottom part of the poster, and it's not really that complicated to do. There's actually a font that will make part of it for you, and the font is called Steel Tongues. And what I will do is unhide the guides and create a text box like that, and probably move it, press Ctrl Command T so that I can load it and see where the center is, to put it right there on top of the center guide. So as I said, I use the Steel Tongues font. You can use any condensed font that you want for the credits, and usually for this particular poster, since the background is quite clear, quite bright, I will use this not black font. I don't want the credits to stick out that much, to stand out too much from the background. So I'll use a color like this, a really dark gray, and maybe I will modify that. So with the Steel Tongues, what you do is, for example, set the, let me actually search for that so you can see it. Yeah, here you'll see it a lot better. So if you want to get like edited by, or you can see right here, director of photography, and you can see the characters that you have to type in order to get this this text based on a novel by. You can get this automatically. So for example, if I want to add a question mark, I will get, if I zoom in, you'll see it better. You get assistant to chief animator. Okay, and you can see I typed the question mark, and then I leave a space, and let's say I want to put my name. Then some other thing, a film by who knows what else. A dot gives you presents presents 3 day 3. Let's move the zooming box, And then photo aesthetics, no. This one, no. Written and directed by some cool, let's just type cool guy. Well, so you can continue. Okay, so well, it was not a dot there. So that's the credit section. I'll just add a few more things here. I'll speed it up, and then we will continue with this. Okay, so here are a few credits that I added for this poster. Everything is made up. I just invented the names and everything, and it doesn't even make sense, but anyways, just to have something there. Okay, so that's how I wanted to have it, and on the last line I want to add the date when this movie will be out, and a few logos. Now the logos I just download them from the internet. I hope I will not have any kind of copyright problems. This is just for aesthetics only. I just want to show you how it looks. So I'll add the Paramount logo there. Then I have a real 3D logo. It has white background. I will not even bother removing it, because I will only change the blend mode to multiply and the white background will go away. Leave that there. Then open the Dolby logo, copy it and pasting it here. Change blend mode to multiply so that the white background goes away. Let's have it more or less the same size as the other ones, something like that. We'll put it on this other side, and the Blu-ray, copy, and let's paste it right here. Multiply and make it smaller. It's not exactly the same as I had it on the original, but it's pretty much the same thing here. I don't think there's an order for putting this here, just make it look good and that's it. So these are all the logos that I have here. This one's, I want to have them a bit higher up, and this one's a little more to the left, something like that. And now let's type here the day when this movie will be out. What I will do actually for the color, I will sample the color from here like that. And I'll use the same font that I use for the 3 text. So let's type, like, we are on September 22nd, so on December 22nd of, so we will use the Levy brush font like that. Put it here. Maybe I want it on top of everything and slightly brighter tone of red, something like that, and a bit bigger. And instead of putting 21, we'll add 3 October. Yeah, it's called day 3 and it will be on air on 3rd of October. So that's okay. Let's leave it like that. And this is our poster. One thing I want to do though is I want to keep the logos in one group. Logos, and I want to reduce the opacity to, let's say, 70. Yeah, that looks a little better. So now the poster is ready, everything is okay. What I want to do now is add some general adjustments to this to make it look a bit better. So just like on a manipulation, once you're done with it, you can make a few color and tone adjustments and things like that. And for this particular poster, what I did is, well, one other thing that I want to do is move this bed a little more, because I don't want to have this right there. So locate the bed and just move it slightly. I don't know why it's not moving. Okay, that's it. Perfect. So what I will do now is add a color lookup on top of everything. So everything that I will add now will be on top of everything there. So these are the credits. So you can see how nice it looks, everything on its own group. Now add the final adjustment. So I'll add a color lookup, and the first color lookup that I use is a 3D LUT adjustment, and I use the saturate net neutrals. This is a file that I actually downloaded from the internet. You'll find it on the folder where you have the where you'll find the stock images. And actually what you need to do with this file, this is a 3DL file, what you have to do is copy that and go inside your Adobe folder, inside the presets, and put it inside this folder that says 3D LUTs. So you have to paste that file in here, and once you're in Photoshop you will find it. It will appear here on this list, or simply go to load 3D LUT and wait for it to open, and you have like an open window you can see here, so you can locate the file on that folder. But if you want it to appear here on this list, you have to paste it on that folder that I just showed you. So I set the opacity of this layer to 30%. Okay, so just to remove a bit the color from the neutrals, from the midtones, and then I'll actually duplicate that because I want another color lookup. And this time I used the late sunset. This one comes with Photoshop, so okay, and then I set the opacity of this to 15%. Okay, so 15%. For my taste it's a little too strong. I'll probably decrease it to about 10. Yep. And then I added, well, let's leave it to 15, and then maybe with the next adjustments we can fix that. Then I added a selective color adjustment, and I only changed the reds and yellows. So for the reds I have 8, -5, 6, and -5. Okay, and then for the yellows I have -4, 6, -5, and 25. Okay, so this is what we did with this. Not a big change, but a little change there. Then a photo filter, and I chose a color myself. I chose some yellow like this, and then I set the density to 25 as it is, preserve luminosity checked, and change the blend mode to color, and reduce the opacity to 20%. Okay, and then the last adjustment is a vibrance adjustment layer, and here I made a sort of a cross setting. So I set the vibrance to -60 or so, -59, -60, and then the saturation up to 46. Okay, that's give it a sort of an unsaturated but not quite unsaturated adjustment. If it's too unsaturated, just reduce a bit the opacity, and you will bring up some of that yellow that we had there on the background. So well, this is the poster. This is how I made this poster. I hope you like it, and well, it's just a matter of being a bit creative, and you can see it's not really a complex one, but I think it's quite effective for a horror movie. So I don't know, that was my idea at least. So what I will do is now group this and name this group adjustments, and now we have a clean layers palette, and this is how the final product looks like. So well, that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Andrei from PSD Box, and see you on the next tutorial.